The royal hall of the Zelarian Empire was made of white crystal and slow-moving light. Tall pillars rose like frozen flames, and banners of ancient victories floated without wind. This was a place where strength was honored above all else. Only the powerful were respected here. Only the flawless were admired. Princess Saraline sat alone at the center of the hall. Her chair was not a throne. It was a carefully designed floating seat that held her body upright. From the waist down, her legs did not move. They had not moved since the day the skyship exploded above the red plains of Karos. That day had changed everything. Once, Saraline had been the pride of the empire. She was tall, sharp-eyed, and strong in both mind and body. She trained with royal guards, studied war strategy, and spoke boldly in council meetings. Many alien nobles wished to marry her, not just for her beauty but for her future as a leader. Now, they would not even look at her. As the council gathered, their voices were low but sharp. Saraline could hear them clearly, she always could. "She is still royal blood," one elder said carefully. "But she cannot walk," another replied. "Our people follow strength. A queen who cannot stand will not be followed." "She is damaged," someone whispered, not caring if she heard. Saraline's hands clenched on the arms of her chair. Her face remained calm, trained since childhood to show no weakness. But inside, the words cut deep. At the far end of the hall, Queen Valora watched her daughter. The queen's armor shone like silver fire, but her eyes were tired. She loved Saraline, but she also ruled an empire that feared weakness more than cruelty. "The matter of marriage must be decided," the queen said at last. Her voice echoed through the hall. "Our alliances are failing. The nobles refuse union." No one argued. They all knew why. A young lord stepped forward, his scales polished and posture proud. "My house withdraws its offer," he said quickly. "We require a future queen who can produce strong heirs." Another followed, then another. Each refusal fell like a stone. Saraline did not beg, she did not cry, she simply lowered her gaze. When the hall finally fell silent, the queen spoke again. "There is another option." All eyes turned to her. "The human alliance," she continued. "They are new to the stars. Their soldiers are brave but physically weak compared to us. They value loyalty and emotion more than perfection." There was a murmur of disapproval. "You would give a princess of Zelara to a human?" an elder asked. "They will accept," the queen said quietly. "They do not refuse the unwanted." Saraline's heart tightened. So this was her fate. Not a chosen bond, not respect, but disposal. The decision was made quickly after that, too quickly. Papers were signed. Messages were sent across the stars. The council left, satisfied that the problem had been solved. Only Saraline remained. The queen approached her daughter slowly. When she reached her, she knelt, ignoring the shocked looks of servants nearby. "I am sorry," Valora said softly. "I failed you." Saraline lifted her eyes. "No, mother, you ruled as you were taught." There was no anger in her voice, only emptiness. The journey to the human world took 12 cycles. Saraline spent most of it in silence, watching stars pass by the viewing glass. Her attendants tried to speak, but she answered with short words. She had learned that hope only caused pain. Humans, she believed, would be no different. She imagined them as loud, staring creatures, curious, pitying, disgusted. When the ship finally docked at the human station, Saraline prepared herself for humiliation. The door opened with a soft hiss. A single human stood waiting. He was taller than she expected, though smaller than her people. His hair was dark, his uniform simple. There were no jewels, no signs of nobility, only a symbol on his chest and calm eyes. "This is Captain Ethan Hale," a translator announced. "Representative of Earth." Ethan stepped forward, then stopped. Instead of standing over her, he knelt. He lowered himself until his eyes were level with hers. "Princess Saraline," he said gently. "Welcome." Saraline froze. No alien had knelt before her since the accident. He did not stare at her legs. He did not look away either. His eyes stayed on her face, respectful and steady. I hope your journey was not too difficult, he continued. If there is anything you need, please tell me. She searched his expression for mockery or pity. She found none. I thank you, she said slowly. The words felt strange in her mouth. As they moved through the station, Saraline noticed something odd. Humans stared, yes, but not with disgust. Some smiled, some nodded politely. Others simply continued their work. No one whispered. Her new quarters were simple but warm. Everything was placed within reach. Ramps replaced steps. The bed adjusted itself to her body with gentle movement. You prepared this, she asked. Yes, Ethan replied. Our engineers asked about your needs. If something is missing, we can fix it. Saraline said nothing. She had never been asked what she needed before. That night she did not sleep. She waited for regret, for anger, for shame. Instead, she felt confusion. The next day, diplomats arrived from the Zellarian Empire to observe the arrangement. They entered the human council room with proud steps and sharp words. One of them laughed openly when he saw Saraline's chair. So this is where broken royalty is sent, he said, to be hidden among weak creatures. Ethan stood. He did not shout. He did not threaten. You are a guest here, he said calmly, and that is my wife you are speaking to. The room fell silent. Saraline's breath caught. Wife, the word had weight. If you cannot show respect, Ethan continued, you will leave. The diplomats stared at him in shock. A human challenging them, they left soon after, their pride wounded. Saraline watched Ethan as he sat back down, his hands steady. Why did you do that? She asked quietly. Because it was right, he replied, and because you deserve it. No one had ever said that to her. Later, alone in her room, Saraline looked at her reflection in the glass. She still saw a body that did not move, a future she did not understand. But for the first time since the accident, she did not feel like a burden. Far away, on her homeworld, the Zellarian Council celebrated the problem they believed they had solved. They did not know they had made the greatest mistake in their history. And Saraline, the princess no one wanted, began a life she never expected, one where her worth was not measured by her legs, but by who she was. The story of humanity's quiet strength had only just begun. Morning on the human station arrived without ceremony. There were no loud horns or ceremonial lights, no servants rushing through halls. Instead, soft tones marked the start of the work cycle, and people moved with calm purpose. Saraline noticed this as she sat near the wide viewing window of her quarters, watching Earth rotate slowly below. She had not slept much, but her thoughts were clearer than before. A quiet knock sounded at her door. Princess Saraline, a voice said gently. May I come in? It is fine, she replied. Ethan entered, not alone. Behind him came two humans, one older with gray hair and kind eyes, and another younger woman carrying a thin tablet. This is Dr. Lena Morris, Ethan said, gesturing to the older one, and engineer Kayla Ortiz. They wanted to introduce themselves. Saraline stiffened slightly. In her empire, doctors often spoke of her condition like a failure, something to be corrected or hidden. Dr. Morris smiled softly. I won't touch anything without your permission, she said. I'm here to listen first. That single sentence surprised Saraline more than anything else. They spoke for a long time. Saraline explained what she could and could not feel, what caused pain, what made daily movement difficult. No one interrupted her. No one looked bored or impatient. Kayla asked careful questions and took notes, not about how to fix Saraline, but how to support her. When they finished, Dr. Morris stood. You are not broken, she said plainly. Your body changed. That happens to humans too. We adapt. Adapt. The words stayed with Saraline long after they left. Later that day, Ethan guided her through the station. He walked at her pace, never pushing. Humans passed by, greeting Ethan and nodding respectfully to Saraline. Some knew who she was, some did not. It did not matter. They entered a large open room filled with screens and moving images. Officers and analysts worked together, voices overlapping in calm discussion. "This is our strategy center," Ethan explained. "I thought you might like to see it." Saraline's eyes sharpened with interest before she could stop herself. She had loved strategy, loved patterns and probabilities. She had thought that part of her life was over. A human officer noticed her gaze. "You see something?" he asked, curious. Saraline hesitated, then leaned forward slightly. "Your patrol routes," she said slowly. "They are efficient but predictable. An enemy watching long enough would learn the pattern." The room grew quiet. Ethan looked at her. "What would you suggest?" she told them. She spoke of false gaps and rotating shifts, of bait routes and silent zones. She spoke with confidence she had not felt in cycles. The humans listened, asked questions, and adjusted their displays. After a while, the officer nodded. "That's very good," he admitted. "Why didn't we think of that?" Saraline did not answer. She was too busy feeling something warm rise in her chest. Respect. Word of her contribution spread quietly through the station. No announcements were made. No praise was shouted. But when Saraline entered rooms now, people looked at her differently. Not as a burden, as an asset. Days passed, then weeks. Ethan and Saraline spoke often, sometimes about duty and politics, sometimes about small things, Earth's oceans, Zellerian music, the strange human habit of drinking bitter liquids for comfort. One evening, as they sat watching stars drift by, Saraline spoke without looking at him. "Why did you accept this marriage?" she asked. Ethan considered the question. "At first, because it was my duty. Earth wanted peace, and I thought maybe I could make things easier for you." "And now?" she asked. He met her gaze. "Now I want to," she nodded, understanding more than the words. Not all visitors were kind. A Zellerian delegation arrived without warning, led by Lord Kersh, a noble who had once sought Saraline's hand. He barely looked at Ethan as he entered, his attention fixed on Saraline's chair. "So," Kersh said coldly, "this is your new court." Saraline straightened. "State your purpose," Kersh sneered. "We wish to confirm what we heard, that you now play advisor among humans." "And if I do?" she asked. "You shame our blood," he replied. "You serve a lesser species." Before Ethan could speak, Saraline did. "You measure worth by muscle and movement," she said calmly. "Humans measure it by action. Tell me, Lord Kersh, when danger came to our borders, where were you?" Kersh bristled but had no answer. "You see weakness," she continued. "They see potential. That is why they grow. That is why you fear them." Silence filled the room. Kersh left soon after, his pride wounded more deeply than before. That night, Saraline's hands trembled as the weight of what she had done settled in. She had challenged her own people, publicly. Ethan found her later, sitting alone. "You were incredible," he said. "I was terrified," she admitted. "Courage often is," he replied. Not long after, alarms rang through the station. A small but fast-moving enemy craft had slipped past outer sensors. It was a test, a probe meant to gather data. The strategy center rushed into action. Saraline was already there. She watched the screens, her mind racing. "They're not attacking," she said. "They're mapping responses." "What do we do?" an officer asked. "We give them the wrong answers," she replied. She guided them through a controlled response. Delayed movements, false signals, a retreat that looked like fear. The enemy ship withdrew, satisfied. Only later did the humans realize what she had done. "They think we're weak now," Ethan said quietly. Saraline allowed herself a small smile. "Good." News of the incident spread beyond the station. Whispers reached alien courts and human councils alike. The paralyzed princess was not silent. She was not helpless. She was dangerous. Back on her homeworld, the queen heard the reports. She dismissed her advisors and sat alone, staring at the stars. "They were wrong," she whispered. "So wrong." On the human station, Saraline rested after long hours of planning. Ethan brought her tea, placing it within reach. "Thank you," she said. He hesitated. "There's something I should tell you." She looked at him calmly. "Speak." "Earth Command wants to formalize your role," he said. "They want you as an official strategic advisor." Saraline's breath caught. They know what that means, Ethan added. Politically, personally. She thought of the council hall, the whispers, the rejection. Then she thought of this station, these people, this human who stood beside her without hesitation. I accept, she said. Ethan smiled, not as a soldier, not as a representative, but as a man who was proud. As the stars drifted beyond the window, Saraline understood something important. She had not been sent here to disappear. She had been sent here to rise. And humanity, underestimated and dismissed by the galaxy, had just gained a powerful ally, one who would stand with them, not despite her scars, but because of them. The days after Saraline accepted the role of official advisor were some of the busiest the human station had ever seen. Meetings followed meetings. Data flowed across screens like rivers of light. Humans moved quickly, but never without purpose. And in the center of it all sat the alien princess who had once been called useless. Saraline adapted. Her chair was upgraded, not to hide her condition but to free her mind. Screens curved around her. Controls responded to voice and small hand movements. Engineers worked quietly, making changes after watching how she thought, how she paused, how she focused. No one rushed her. No one spoke over her. That alone made her more dangerous than any weapon. Ethan watched her often from the side of the room. He had seen generals shout and demand obedience. Saraline did neither. She listened first. Then, when she spoke, the room leaned toward her words. A threat had been growing at the edge of known space. A coalition of aggressive species, testing borders, attacking supply routes, retreating before full response could form. They were patient, clever, dangerous. They're not seeking territory, Saraline said during one briefing. They're seeking weakness. And you think they found it? A human admiral asked. They think they have, she replied. In humanity. The room was silent. Saraline continued. You are young among the stars. You lack ancient fleets and inherited power. So they believe you will break first. And will we? Ethan asked. She turned her eyes to him. Only if you act like what they expect. Her plan was bold, risky. It required restraint when instinct demanded force. Humans debated fiercely, voices rising, hands striking tables. Saraline waited until the noise burned itself out. Strength is not always shown by striking, she said calmly. Sometimes it is shown by choosing when not to. The plan was approved. Human fleets shifted positions. Patrols slowed. Supply routes appeared thin. Messages were leaked, carefully crafted, to suggest internal disagreement. The enemy took the bait. They struck a distant human outpost with overwhelming force. Alarms rang across the station. Ethan stood at Saraline's side as images filled the screens. Explosions lit the dark. Human ships fell back exactly as planned. This feels wrong, a young officer whispered. It feels like loss, Saraline replied. That is why it works. The enemy pushed deeper, confident now, too confident. When they crossed the invisible line Saraline had drawn, everything changed. Hidden fleets emerged from silent zones. Human ships did not charge blindly. They boxed the enemy in, cutting off retreat, disrupting communication. Not with brute strength, but with precision. The enemy panicked. They had expected fear. They found patience. The battle ended faster than anyone predicted. Cheers broke out across the station. Humans hugged, some laughed, some cried. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, breathing out slowly. Saraline did not celebrate. Send a message, she said, clear and open. To who? The admiral asked. To everyone, she replied. Tell them humanity does not seek domination, but it will not be prey. The message spread across the stars. For the first time, other species began to watch humans not with amusement, but with caution. Not all reactions were positive. On Saraline's homeworld, the Zelarian Council was in chaos. Reports contradicted everything they believed. A princess they had discarded was now shaping wars. A species they dismissed was winning without overwhelming force. Lord Kersh slammed his claw against the council table. This is impossible. She cannot command. She cannot even walk. Queen Valora said nothing. She watched the projection of her daughter, calm, sharp-eyed, unbroken. She always could command, the queen said quietly. We simply refused to see it. Back on the station, the cost of victory revealed itself. A delayed strike hit one of the outer defense platforms. It was small, desperate, but effective. Casualties were light, but one name appeared on the injury report that froze Saraline's blood: Ethan Hale. He had been leading an evacuation team when the platform shook. He shielded civilians as debris fell. A beam collapsed. He did not move in time. Saraline felt the world narrow to a single point. "Where is he?" she asked, her voice steady only through effort. "In medical," a voice answered. "He's alive." She moved at once. Medical bays were bright and crowded. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. Humans lay injured but calm, joking even through pain. It was something Saraline still did not fully understand. Ethan lay on a bed near the far wall. His uniform was torn. His arm was wrapped. His face pale. Saraline stopped beside him. He opened his eyes slowly and smiled when he saw her. "Guess I missed the celebration." Her hands trembled as she reached for his uninjured one. "Do not do that again," she said softly. He squeezed her fingers. "I'll try." She stayed until he slept. For the first time since her injury, Saraline cried where someone could see. Days passed as Ethan recovered. Saraline threw herself into work, but her focus was sharper, edged with fear she did not want to name. The enemy did not retreat fully. They changed tactics. Political pressure followed military probing. Accusations, false claims, attempts to isolate humanity. Saraline countered every move. She spoke before councils. She debated alien leaders who refused to look at her legs and failed to look at her mind. She dismantled arguments with calm logic and uncomfortable truth. Some hated her for it. Some admired her. None could ignore her. Ethan returned to duty before he was fully cleared. Saraline noticed. She said nothing at first. One night as they watched stars drift in silence, she spoke. "You do not trust stillness," she said. He smiled faintly. "I grew up learning that if you stop moving, you fall behind." "You were injured protecting others," she said. "That is strength. But so is knowing when to rest." He looked at her, truly looked. "You're talking about me," he said, "but you're thinking about yourself." She did not deny it. "I was taught that if I could not stand, I was nothing," she said quietly. "Humans taught me that standing is not the only way to face the world." Ethan reached out, resting his hand over hers. No pity, no hesitation, just presence. Another attack came weeks later, larger, coordinated. This time the enemy aimed not at ships but at trust. False transmissions flooded channels, pretending to be human distress calls. Confusion spread. Saraline recognized the pattern immediately. "They want us to turn on ourselves," she said. "Do not answer any call without verification. Centralize response." The enemy adjusted again, frustrated. Then they made a mistake. They targeted the station itself. Alarms screamed. Lights flickered. Defense systems activated. Humans moved with discipline, not panic. Saraline remained at the command center. "Evacuate her," someone shouted. "No," she said firmly. "I stay." Ethan stood beside her. "She stays," he repeated. The station shook as enemy fire struck shields. Systems strained. Time slowed. Saraline saw the opening. "Reroute power from outer ring to core," she ordered. "Let them think we're failing." "That will leave us exposed," an officer warned. "Only if they are patient," she replied. "They are not." The enemy pushed harder, sensing victory. Then the trap closed. A pulse burst from the station core, disabling enemy weapons without destroying ships. Silence followed. The battle was over. Cheers erupted. This time Saraline allowed herself to breathe. Later, alone in the quiet aftermath, she looked at the stars and felt the weight of what she had become. No longer a discarded princess. No longer a symbol of weakness. She was a commander. A strategist, a bridge between worlds. Ethan joined her, standing quietly. They underestimated you, he said. She smiled faintly. They underestimated humanity. Across the galaxy, stories began to change. The paralyzed princess was no longer a warning. She was an example. And humanity, standing beside her, was no longer invisible among the stars. They were rising together. Weeks passed since the last enemy attack, but the calm was fragile. The human station thrummed with energy. Crews running drills, maintaining systems, and analyzing reports from the edges of space. Saraline's presence had become central, her chair rolling smoothly between consoles, her voice guiding decisions, her mind seeing patterns others missed. She had grown into the role of a strategist, a leader, and yet in her heart she carried the quiet weight of what humans called alien politics. One morning, a transmission arrived from the Zellarian Empire. The message was formal but urgent. It requested Saraline's immediate return to the homeworld. Along with the message came the promise of advanced medical technology, technology that could, in theory, restore her lost mobility. In other words, they wanted her to leave Ethan and the humans, return to her people, and reclaim her place as a perfect princess. Saraline read the message in silence. Her fingers brushed the controls of her chair, and for the first time she felt the old sting of doubt. Was she betraying her people by staying? Was she refusing duty by choosing humans over her birthright? Ethan entered quietly, sensing her mood. "Message from your homeworld," he said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. His touch was steady. "Do you want to open it?" Saraline nodded. He handed her the tablet and she read the words aloud slowly as though weighing each one. She did not look at him. "They want me back," she said. "They offer restoration. They call it an opportunity, but it is really a demand." Ethan remained silent. He always waited for her to speak first. That patience was something Saraline had grown to depend on. "What do you want?" he finally asked. She turned her gaze to him. "Do I want to walk again?" she asked. "Or do I want to stand beside someone who respects me as I am?" His eyes softened. "I hope you choose what makes you strongest, strength." The word resonated with her. She had learned from humans that strength was not always physical. It was courage, will, loyalty, and the ability to act despite fear. "I will stay," she said finally. "I will not leave humanity, not for technology, not for titles, not for fear of shame." Ethan nodded, a faint smile on his face. "Then we act together, always." That same day, a Zellarian delegation arrived at the human station. They carried themselves with all the pride of a species that had ruled the stars for centuries. Kersh was among them, as was a council representative who had once turned away from Saraline. Their arrival was not hostile, at first, but it carried expectation. They believed the princess would be swayed by her own people. Saraline met them in the strategy hall. Ethan stood beside her, calm but ready. "You have grown bold," Kersh said, his tone sharp. "To command humans, to defy your own empire. Why do you do this?" Saraline's voice was steady. "Because it is right, because it works, because humanity values life, loyalty, and courage above appearances." The council representative scoffed. "You serve a weaker species. They cannot survive in our conflicts." "They survive because they think differently," Saraline replied. "Because they adapt, and because they act together." Ethan added, "and because they stand for each other, not just themselves." Kersh and the council members exchanged uneasy glances. They had expected a princess humbled by her condition, weakened in spirit. They found instead a leader whose mind outshone any physical advantage. The delegation pressed further. "We offer you the tools to become whole again," the representative said. "You could return as the perfect heir and reclaim your place." Saraline's gaze hardened. "I do not need to be perfect to lead. My worth is not in walking but in choice, in action, in loyalty. I choose humanity." The words fell like steel across the hall. The delegation realized they had miscalculated, and a quiet tension replaced their assumed superiority. Later, whispers reached the human command. Some humans worried that the aliens might escalate to threats or even military action. But Saraline remained calm, guiding decisions, adjusting defenses, and preparing for any eventuality. She understood strategy, and more importantly, she understood human courage. When the first signs of a new threat appeared, a fleet of Zelarian extremists attacking a nearby colony, Saraline acted quickly. She coordinated with Ethan, assigning patrols, routing supplies, and predicting enemy movements. The humans followed her guidance, trusting her judgment. Her plans were precise, exploiting weaknesses without exposing civilians, manipulating the enemy's expectations at every turn. The battle came at night. Stars were bright in the vacuum outside, streaked with laser fire. Ships moved in silence and chaos simultaneously. Humans did not panic. They executed each command flawlessly. Saraline's mind raced, calculating angles, assessing damage, and giving instructions with calm authority. In the midst of the conflict, a human squadron was trapped by superior enemy numbers. Ethan piloted his ship to their aid, demonstrating the same bravery he had shown in earlier skirmishes. Saraline directed the rescue operation, rerouting other ships, creating decoys, and orchestrating the attack to maximize effect with minimal risk. By the time the battle ended, humans had won, capturing enemy vessels and preventing civilian losses. Saraline's strategy had succeeded. The Zelarian extremists retreated, confused and frustrated, unable to understand how a discarded princess had outmaneuvered them. Afterward, the humans celebrated quietly, their relief and pride clear. Ethan approached Saraline, smiling despite exhaustion. "They underestimated us," he said. Saraline shook her head. "They underestimated you and me. But more importantly, they underestimated what we can achieve together." The victory brought a shift in perception. Humans and aliens alike began to take notice of Saraline's capabilities. Reports from across the galaxy described the paralyzed princess as a master strategist, a leader who refused to be defined by her body. Despite the success, Saraline faced personal challenges. Her condition remained, and she felt the weight of expectation every day. She had to prove herself constantly, not just to humans, but to her own people who still whispered from afar. Yet the presence of Ethan beside her gave her confidence. His faith, his respect, and his partnership reminded her that strength could take many forms. One evening, as the station's lights dimmed, Saraline and Ethan sat by the window, watching the stars drift slowly past. Silence stretched between them, comfortable and warm. "You have changed everything," Saraline said quietly. "I only followed you," Ethan replied. "You showed them and me what real strength looks like." She looked at him, and for the first time she allowed herself a faint smile. "Perhaps strength is not just action but influence, not just courage but trust. You taught me that." "And you taught me," Ethan said, "that humans are capable of more than anyone believed." They sat together in silence, watching the galaxy spin around them. The human station, once a place of routine and order, had become a proving ground, not just for humans but for the power of choice, loyalty, and courage. Meanwhile, far away on her homeworld, the Zelarian Council debated fiercely. They could not ignore the reports. Their discarded princess had become a symbol. Their underestimation of humans now threatened their prestige. They whispered of error, misjudgment, and pride. Queen Valora alone remained silent, a quiet satisfaction in her eyes as she realized her daughter had grown beyond the Empire's limited vision. On the station, Saraline's role continued to expand. She was no longer merely an advisor. She had become a coordinator, a strategist, and a bridge between species. Humans looked to her for decisions. Allies consulted her judgment. Even some skeptical aliens reached out, cautiously seeking guidance. And yet, Saraline did not forget her origins. She understood her people, their fears, and their pride. She used that understanding not to punish, but to protect. Her condition, once a mark of shame, had become irrelevant compared to the strength of her mind and the clarity of her vision. As the stars continued to drift past the station, Saraline sat beside Ethan, feeling a sense of purpose she had never known. She had chosen humanity over shame, action over passivity, and courage over fear. And in doing so, she had not only saved countless lives, but had redefined what it meant to be strong. The galaxy had taken notice, and Saraline, the princess no one wanted, had become the leader everyone would remember. Her future was no longer dictated by the limitations of her body or the prejudices of her people. It was defined by choice, partnership, and the courage to stand beside a species underestimated by all. And humanity, standing with her, was ready to rise among the stars. Time passed, and the human station became a hub of cooperation, diplomacy, and quiet power. Saraline had grown into a figure that no one could ignore. Her presence was commanding, her decisions precise, and her courage inspiring. She moved among humans and aliens alike, not as someone to be pitied, but as a leader whose mind and judgment mattered more than physical perfection. Ethan often watched her from the side, quietly proud. He had seen her go from a princess cast aside to a strategist whose influence shaped fleets, lives, and the perception of humans across the galaxy. And though he was proud, he never spoke of it. He simply stood beside her, ready for whatever came next. The news that the Zelarian Empire had officially requested her return arrived on a bright morning. The message was both formal and desperate. The Empire admitted that they had misjudged her. They offered her a throne, advanced medical treatments to restore her legs, and the full respect they had denied her before. They asked her to come home, leaving the humans and Ethan behind. Saraline read the message carefully, then set the tablet down. She did not speak immediately. She thought about the battles they had faced together, the people who trusted her, and the life she had built on this station. She thought about Ethan, who never treated her as broken, who never pitied her, who had always stood beside her in calm and storm. "I will not go back," she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. Ethan nodded. "You've already made your choice," he said softly. "And it's the right one." Saraline looked out at the stars, thinking of her homeworld, of the empire that had rejected her, and of the humans who had accepted her. "I do not need to walk to lead. I do not need perfection to be respected." Strength is not measured by what you can do with your body. It is measured by the choices you make and the courage to act. The Human Council confirmed her role officially, giving her authority to coordinate human and allied fleets, to advise on strategy, and to act as a diplomatic liaison. Her decisions were no longer suggestions. They were directives followed with confidence. Soon, the consequences of her choice became clear. Reports came in of unrest and conflict across the galaxy. Smaller alien factions, inspired by her example, refused to bow to those who believed humans were weak. They began to ally with Earth and the human colonies. Trade routes opened, political alliances formed, and humans found their influence expanding beyond anything predicted. Yet the galaxy still tested them. A coalition of hostile alien forces gathered near the outer colonies, determined to crush humanity before it grew stronger. The coalition underestimated humans as they always did, but they had not accounted for Saraline. Saraline and Ethan worked together, developing a plan that required careful timing, cunning, and courage. Humans and allies were positioned strategically, with decoy routes, baited attacks, and careful communication that lured the enemy into traps. It was a dangerous game, but Saraline's mind was sharp, seeing every angle and predicting every move. When the enemy attacked, humans did not panic. Ships moved in perfect coordination, every move guided by Saraline's commands. Enemy fire hit decoy ships, while the main fleet executed flanking maneuvers with precision. Humans captured vessels, rescued civilians, and neutralized the threat without unnecessary loss. During the conflict, Ethan piloted a squadron to protect a civilian convoy, just as he had done before. Caroline coordinated from the station, her calm voice guiding every maneuver. Even when alarms screamed and explosions shook the hulls, she remained steady. Her strategies proved flawless and the enemy withdrew, humiliated and defeated. In the quiet after the battle, humans celebrated, but Caroline did not revel in triumph. She moved among the crews, checking on the injured, offering encouragement, and observing the results of her decisions. She realized that her greatest power was not her mind alone, but the ability to inspire loyalty, courage, and teamwork. Across the galaxy, the Zellarian Empire watched and reeled. Their discarded princess had outshone them all. Aliens who had once rejected her were forced to recognize that she was not only a leader but also a symbol that strength came in many forms, and that humans could rise when guided by wisdom and courage. Queen Valora observed from afar, her eyes filled with quiet pride. "She was never broken," she whispered. "We simply refused to see it." Back on the station, Caroline sat beside Ethan in the observation room, looking at the stars. Silence stretched comfortably between them. "You've changed everything," Caroline said softly. "No," Ethan replied. "We changed everything together." She turned to him, her gaze steady. "Humans taught me that strength is not only in what you can do, but in what you choose to do. You showed me that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act in spite of it. I am stronger because of you. And you," he said quietly, "have shown me that humanity is capable of more than anyone believed, that courage, loyalty, and intelligence can change the galaxy." Caroline smiled faintly, a smile that reflected both exhaustion and satisfaction. "Perhaps the galaxy is learning what humans have always known. That strength is not measured by power alone, but by heart, by will, by the choices we make. And sometimes it takes someone who was rejected, underestimated, or called weak to show it." The humans on the station began to celebrate quietly, exchanging stories of victory, relief, and courage. They laughed, they hugged, they spoke in their own language, but Caroline understood their joy because she had become part of it. For the first time, she felt not like a visitor, but like she belonged. The alien factions that had once mocked humans were no longer laughing. Reports described how the paralyzed princess led with precision, courage, and compassion. Her decisions had saved thousands, inspired allies, and reshaped political alliances. The galaxy began to see that humans were no longer weak or insignificant. Even Lord Kersh, who had once sneered at her condition, now watched cautiously. His respect, though grudging, was real. He realized that Caroline and the humans she supported were forces to be reckoned with. Months later, a galactic assembly convened to discuss peace, trade, and alliances. Caroline was invited not as a princess, but as a leader. She spoke clearly, her voice calm but authoritative. She reminded every listener that the galaxy was stronger when cooperation outweighed arrogance, when courage outweighed fear, and when underestimated species were given the chance to rise. Ethan stood beside her during the assembly, quiet, proud, and steadfast. Caroline looked at him and smiled. Together, they had proven what no one had believed possible. After the assembly, Caroline returned to the station. She moved freely in her chair, issuing instructions, checking on crews, and planning for the next challenge. She was no longer the princess who had been cast aside. She was a leader, a strategist, a symbol, and a partner in a cause greater than herself. One evening, as they watched stars drift by, Ethan took her hand. "You have changed the galaxy," he said. "No," Caroline replied. "We have changed the galaxy together." She looked out at the endless stars, and for the first time she felt no shame, no doubt, no hesitation. She had found her place not by regaining what was lost, but by choosing what mattered: courage, loyalty, partnership, and humanity. The galaxy would remember her not as a princess who could not walk, but as the architect of a new era, one in which strength was measured not by perfection, but by heart, will, and the unyielding determination to rise above expectation. And humanity, once dismissed and underestimated, stood proudly beside her, ready to meet the challenges of the stars with wisdom, courage, and unity. The paralyzed princess, once discarded, now led with vision and strength beyond any legend. And for the first time in her life, Caroline knew that her worth had never been in what she had lost, but in everything she had chosen to become. She turned to Ethan, eyes bright. "Let's see how far we can go," she said. And together, they stepped forward into a future they would shape. Humans and aliens, strength and courage united, a galaxy forever changed by their choices.